My name is Shah. My marriage to Abigail unraveled after a night that should have been just another dinner, but turned into a turning point I never saw coming. It started with her constant need to tear me down with words, a pattern that had become all too familiar. One of her friends looked her directly in the eye that night and said, "Let's go outside." They both stepped away from the table, leaving me alone with my thoughts and a deep, growing sense of clarity. What happened after that moment would become the beginning of a choice I never imagined I'd make. She never saw it coming, and yet everything that followed hinged on that one evening. When I first met Abigail, I genuinely believed I'd found someone rare. We dated for just over 2 years, and in all that time, there wasn't a soul alive who would convince me she wasn't the one. She was beautiful in the kind of way that turned heads, but spoke in a tone that made everything she said feel a little more alive, more vivid. She had this energy about her, charming, magnetic. Being around her made life feel more colorful, more thrilling. But the very thing that drew me in would later be the blade that cut deepest. Abigail liked to tease. At first, it seemed innocent, playful. She'd call me silly names, ones that brushed just a bit too close to insults, or tell exaggerated stories about me that made people laugh. I brushed it off like everyone else did, even laughed with them. But it shifted. Her teasing stopped feeling affectionate. It became a way to mock me, often in front of others, with a casualness that made it hard to call out. I'm not someone who shares things freely, and early on, I told her that some of her remarks made me uncomfortable. They felt disrespectful. She just smiled and waved it off, saying I was being too sensitive. "I'm just joking," she'd say. "Don't be so uptight." It put me in a strange place. I didn't want to be the guy who couldn't take a joke, the overly sensitive boyfriend who ruined the mood. But I also didn't want to be the man laughed at by his own partner. I wanted her to be herself, to be free, but not at the cost of my dignity. Still, she didn't stop. She just learned to mask it better, to disguise the digs and humor, to walk the line without crossing it too obviously. And instead of putting my foot down, I let it go. I told myself it wasn't worth the drama, that I was just being too serious. I chose to keep the peace, and that choice would come back to haunt me. When I proposed, I tried to make it something memorable, a moment worth cherishing. She looked at the ring, tilted her head, and laughed. "It looks kind of cheap," she said. I smiled on the outside. Inside, my stomach sank. She eventually said yes, but something in that moment never left me. During the wedding planning, she was completely involved. She controlled every detail, obsessed over the arrangements. And I let her. I told myself this was just who she was, passionate, particular. After we got married and she moved into my place, I thought we'd finally find our rhythm. I imagined we'd slow down, breathe, settle into a shared life. But instead, the teasing evolved. Her words cut deeper. Her tone grew colder. I couldn't even tell anymore whether she was joking or being cruel. Her voice had this way of making me second-guess my own feelings, of twisting things. So I didn't know how I was supposed to react. And I did what I thought was expected of a good husband. I stayed quiet. I kept smiling. Happy wife, happy life, right? We went on a double date, once with some mutual friends. Just a casual night out. When someone asked how married life was going, Abigail laughed and said, "Don't let him cook. He'll burn the water." Everyone chuckled. I did too, but inside, something shifted. Why did she always have to do this? Why did I always have to be the punchline? Still, I didn't speak up. Back then, I still believed keeping the peace was the most important thing. About 1.5 years into our marriage, I got the kind of news that shakes a man. My company was downsizing. I was being let go. After the shock settled, I wasn't completely crushed. I had experience. I believed I'd land on my feet soon enough. And in the meantime, I figured we could manage. She was working after all. But when I told her, she didn't even let me finish. Before I could get a full sentence out, she interrupted. "So how are we supposed to run the house now?" Her voice was already laced with panic and blame. I stood there, stunned. I hadn't even asked her for anything yet. I was just trying to share what had happened. Then she added, "What you made wasn't even enough before. What now?" That hit harder than I expected. For the next 3 months, I lived off my savings. I didn't ask her for help. Not once. I cut back on everything: meals, outings, small comforts, stretching every dollar I had. I took the pressure quietly, hoping she'd appreciate that I was trying, that I was still providing, even while struggling. Eventually, I found another job. The pay was decent, but nowhere near what I used to earn. And Abigail never let me forget it. Her attitude turned. She picked fights over the smallest things, snapped at me constantly. Everything felt like my fault. Losing my job, in her eyes, meant I had failed as a man. I had no idea how much she made. She never told me. She never offered to share the weight. I kept handling the bills the best I could, even when it felt like I was drowning. The one time I asked her to help, just to pick up something small for the house, she responded, "You're hopeless with everything now. I'm forced to be the man." Her voice dripped with contempt. It wasn't just disappointment, it was disgust. Even my best friend noticed a change. One day, he pulled me aside and said, "Man, I don't like the way your wife talks to you sometimes." I gave him a half-hearted smile, the kind you wear when you're too ashamed to admit the truth, and replied, "You know how women behave." But I didn't believe that. I just didn't know what else to say. A few weeks later, a mutual friend was celebrating their wedding anniversary with a small dinner. Just close couples. Abigail was thrilled. She spent days talking about what to wear, down to her lipstick shade. She planned like it was a red carpet event. Meanwhile, I was exhausted mentally, emotionally, physically. Things at home were tense, awkward. I didn't want to go, but I went. I didn't want to disappoint our friends or start another fight. From the moment we sat down, I could feel the weight of the night. Everyone got Abigail's usual charm, her bright laugh. I got sarcasm and clip tones. When the waiter came by and I asked him to repeat something I didn't catch, she snapped, loud enough for the table to hear. "He said it twice already. How can you not hear?" I felt the heat rise up my neck. Later, I mispronounced a French wine name, and instead of letting it slide or correcting me gently, Abigail laughed and said, "It's pronounced this, not whatever you just said." The table laughed. I smiled, but I felt smaller than ever. And just when I thought I could get through the rest of the evening quietly, she brought up an old story about me. Something deeply personal, something embarrassing. She told it like it was the funniest thing she'd ever heard. They all laughed again. I wanted to disappear. I wasn't laughing. I was shrinking. That's when one of her friends looked Abigail straight in the eye and said, "Hey, let's go outside." It wasn't a request, not quite a command, but something in her tone said enough. Abigail looked confused but followed. They stepped out. I sat alone at the table, my food untouched, my face calm but my insides boiling. A few minutes later, she returned. She didn't look at me. She smiled at her friend across the table and picked up the conversation where she left off. But she didn't mention me again. That was the moment everything in me shifted. In the car afterward, Abigail kept talking like everything was fine. I didn't respond. After a few minutes, she noticed. "Why are you acting like this? You always take things too seriously." "It's just how I talk." Her tone was sharp, irritated, like I was the problem. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I just went quiet. And that silence, it shook her. Usually I try to fix things, but not this time. That night, I didn't sleep in our bed. I went to the couch. Saturday night, Sunday night. She didn't say much, probably waiting for me to cave. But I didn't. I wasn't going to. By Monday morning, as we were getting ready for work, she asked, "So you're still angry?" That same guilt-tripping tone. I looked at her, then looked away. I left early that day, but I didn't go to work. I had already scheduled an appointment with a divorce lawyer the day before. I sat in that office calmly and told him I wanted to file. I didn't want to wait. I needed it to start now. After that, I went to my boss and requested emergency leave. I didn't explain much, just sounded like someone in crisis. He agreed. That evening, I went home before she got back. I packed what I needed, grabbed what I couldn't leave behind. No note, no explanation. I got in the car and drove through the night to my parents' place in the next state. The longest drive I've ever done in one go. But I didn't feel tired. I felt free. She didn't call that night. Not the next either. Maybe she thought I was bluffing. But when the divorce papers were finally served, my phone rang. Her name flashed on the screen. I answered. Her voice came sharp, irritated. "Is this the game you want to play?" I listened for a second, then hung up. I didn't need to hear anything else. She got herself a lawyer, and we entered the process. That's when the blame came, through her attorney. She painted me as weak, unmotivated, a man who failed to provide. I didn't return fire. I simply told the court that the marriage had become toxic, that her daily disrespect, the constant belittling, had eroded my sense of self. We had no house, no assets, no children. On paper, it should have been clean. But during the financial disclosures, I learned something that shocked me. She had been making significantly more money than I ever did. Even when I had my best job, she still out-earned me. She had the means to help when I was struggling. But she chose not to. She watched me stretch every dollar, go without meals, stress over rent, while she stood by, criticizing me for not doing enough. In the end, the court ordered her to pay me spousal support for a time. Her face showed how much she hated it. Her silence, her body language, everything screamed resentment. But I didn't care. If she had to share a fraction of what she held back while watching me sink, so be it. After the divorce, I thought it was done. But then, the same friend who had pulled her aside during that dinner reached out. I hadn't spoken to her since that night. When I picked up, she didn't sugarcoat anything. "You didn't deserve any of what you went through," she said. Her voice was steady, serious. She admitted that Abigail had often mocked me in their girls' group, that the dinner humiliation wasn't a one-off. It was a pattern, a way of life for Abigail. I felt a mix of anger and release. I had ignored so many signs, let so many things slide. But not anymore. I chose to walk away from something that was slowly crushing my spirit. There was no victory parade, no celebration, but there was clarity, and for the first time in a long time, peace.